This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome to the Unitarian Church in Fall River, where we think religious questions are important, but we want to work out our own answers, where we gather to share ideas and support one another. We gather this hour as people of faith, having sorrows and joys and needs and gifts. We'd like to speak of hope as a sign of our quest for truth and meaning and the celebration of the life we share together. Please join in our opening hymn. If you read music, don't. This is the music for which the hymn was originally written. join in our affirmation? It's in the order of service. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve human need, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine, thus to be covenant with each other and with God. Are there announcements? David?
The Course in Miracles program continues. We have all of our students, except the one Andrea in the restaurant, with us today. So we're up to about 389 regular followers. And just so you know, we're not Unitarians in the sense that all, I guess we are more Unitarians. Because we're free to talk about our own individual point of view and to express it and to get feedback and to interact with folks. So we're pleased to continue that this week.
Yes, Kit?
So I just want to say that I've been working hard on our new season, and I've got some scheduled through December, and actually running off for the rest of the year as well. So if you'd like to see who's going to be leading our worship services for us, come take a peek at it. You're welcome to do that. Maybe I should take a little shoot for that all the time. Next week, Rob Ross will be here, so if he's been here before, you know who he is, and I will be giving you the welcome. And I wanted to also share with you that I'm advocating with the men in my life, and we made an apple cake from made apples. So that told me she's going to tell me it's in it. So join us for coffee cake.
Any others? The prayer in a minute is one of the Psalms. And the psalmists, writing more than 2,000 years ago, had a concept of God that lots of us don't have. So to kind of soften you up, as an invocation, I want to give a blessing. This is from The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. The way to link what may be your idea of God with the ancient idea is to think that, I think this is true. To the ancient people, God was basically Father Nature. God was the force behind what we call nature. They didn't have a word for nature. They said God. But here's the invitation from Gibran. God, teach us that in order to know you, we need not be solvers of riddles. Teach us to look into the sky and see you outstretching your arms in lightning and descending in rain. Teach us to see you smiling in flowers, then rising and waving your hands in trees. Teach us to see you playing with our children and grandchildren and laughing with our friends. And teach us to see you at times like this in the faces of the people here gathered. The prayer this morning is from the 139th Psalm. There are 150 Psalms. This is near the end. God, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely. You hem me in, behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to the sky, you are there. If I make my bed under the earth, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will cover me, and the light around me become night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. For it was you who formed me in my inward parts. It was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them as yet existed. How weighty to me are your thoughts. How vast is the sum of them. I try to count them. They are more than the sand. I come to the end. I am still with you. Search me and know my heart. Test me and know my thoughts. See if there is any hurtful way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. And now let us be silent together to create an opportunity for prayer or meditation. I personally am very skeptical about miracles, about the supernatural, about angels, all of that. But my skepticism notwithstanding, there are stories in the Bible that I return to over and over. These stories engage my mind. They strengthen my heart. They nourish my spirit. To be honest, some of my interest in the Bible has to do with my past. I was raised in a mainstream Christian denomination, Roman Catholicism, French Canadian Roman Catholicism in the 50s, in which I would say in retrospect, I was religiously violated. By which I mean that my natural religious curiosity was suffocated by the imposition of dogmas that were obsolete and terrifying. I feel vindicated today when I realize that my religious leaders back then were either unaware of the results of modern biblical scholarship, or worse, they were aware but didn't trust the people with the truth. I would say that the nuns in particular did not have very extensive educations and were almost certainly not aware of the results of modern biblical scholarship. Some of the priests were aware, but they didn't trust us with the truth. But my past notwithstanding, most of my interest in the Bible is not related to feeling vindicated about my past. Most of my interest has simply to do with the situation in which I find myself and in which I think you find yourself. I was born into a universe I didn't create. It's very big and very old. I feel awe, puzzlement, fear, and a desire to do what's right. I won't be here long. I want to make every moment count. The biblical writers were in the same situation, and their ignorance of modern science notwithstanding, they were smart. Just because they were ignorant, right? Because they didn't know about the laws of physics or about the internet, that doesn't mean they were stupid. They were smart. And the biblical writers I admire seem to have felt that love is important, and paying attention and thinking hard and feeling deeply. I welcome the insights that their stories provide. And somehow it makes my life richer to be in touch with fellow travelers from so long ago.
My sermon is called "The Bible is a Library, Not a Book." It looks like a book, though, right? It looks like a book. It's really, the Protestant Bible anyway, is 66 books. They're the 39 books of what Christians call the Old Testament, and which I would rather call the Jewish Bible. It's the Jewish Bible. The books are not in the same order as they are in the Jewish Bible, but otherwise it's the Jewish Bible. It's the same collection. And there are 27 books in the Christian part of the Bible, the New Testament. These 66 books were composed at different times over the course of more than 1,000 years. More than 1,000 years. And they were collected later. The Jewish Bible wasn't collected until the 2nd century AD. And the New Testament wasn't collected until the 4th century AD, more than 300 years after the death of Jesus. And some books that you'd think would be there were left out. For example, I want to read you a little passage. There's one of the books in the Bible is called the First Book of Kings. And toward the end of it, the author has just been talking about King Ahab, an ancient Israelite king. And the author says, now the rest of the acts of Ahab and all that he did and the ivory house that he built. Wow. And all the cities that he built, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? In other words, the author's saying, I'm not going to tell you all this stuff because it's all in this other book, the book of the annals of the kings of Israel. But that book is not in the Bible. That book doesn't exist today. The Bible doesn't include everything you might think it might. Or if we go to the New Testament, the Gospel of Thomas. The Gospel of Thomas is a collection of sayings of Jesus that seems to be as old as the Gospels that are in the New Testament, but it was left out, and it was only found in an ancient garbage dump in Egypt in 1945. And it's really fascinating to read in connection with the Gospels that are in the Bible. Well, maybe that's another sermon someday. So not only are some books left out of the Bible, there's some books that are in the Bible that are not what they seem. For example, sometimes what seem to be separate books are really a single book, like that First Book of Kings. There's a First Book of Kings and a Second Book of Kings. Well, there's really just one Book of Kings, but it was too big to fit on a single scroll. So they put half on one scroll and half on another scroll. It's not two books. It's two parts of one book. They say this about, by the way, in the New Testament, the Gospel of Luke and the book called Acts of the Apostles. Those seems to be two parts of just one work by one author. And sometimes what seem to be single books are really compilations. Scholars say that Genesis is really 3 different books woven together.
3 different books that were written at 3 different times, and then someone cut them up into pieces. And if you take, well, in my Bible on page 14, the first paragraph is from a source that the scholars call J. They don't know what it was originally called, so they just use letters. The first paragraph is from a source called J, and then the next paragraph is from a source called E, and then the next paragraph is from a source called J again, and then the next paragraph is from a source called P. And so the Genesis is a quilt, or if you like, a weaving together of 3 continuous narratives that existed independently at one time. But biblical literalists, fundamentalists, we call them usually, say the Bible is a unity. It's a single book by a single author, namely God, with a single message. I feel kind of sorry for people who have this point of view, because it's so hard then for them to deal with all the contradictions. The Bible is just filled with contradictions. For example, and you don't have to go very far into the Bible to find this, in Genesis 1, the story of the creation, chapter 1 of Genesis, the plants are created first, and then the animals, and then people. Now, in Genesis 2, there's a different creation story by a different author, by the way, a creation story that's hundreds of years older than the story in Genesis 1. And in Genesis 2, people are created first, and then the plants, and then the animals. It's a contradiction. How many animals did Noah take onto the ark? And we all say 2 of each kind, right? And it does say that in the book of Genesis, does say 2 of each kind, except a few verses later, it says Noah took 2 of each kind of the non-kosher animals, but of the kosher animals, he took 7 pairs of each kind. In other words, 14. What's the name of the mountain on which God supposedly gave Moses the 10 Commandments? We think of it as Mount Sinai, but there are many, many references to it in the Bible as Mount Horeb, Horeb. Many references to Mount Sinai, but many references to Mount Horeb. Or if we go to the New Testament, think of Jesus' stepfather, Joseph. What was his father's name? Well, according to the Gospel of Matthew, Joseph's father's name was Jacob. But according to the Gospel of Luke, Joseph's father's name was Heli, Heli. The Bible is full of contradictions. We tend to think of it as a unity nonetheless, and even religious liberals tend to think of it as a unity. For example, and I've mentioned this before, the Christmas story we tell at Christmas time. There are really 2 different Christmas stories in the Bible. There's one in the Gospel of Matthew, and there's one in the Gospel of Luke, and they're really completely different stories. They have almost nothing in common except the names of the principal characters. But what we do at Christmas time is we take the census that brought Mary and Joseph to Bethlehem, we take that from the Gospel of Luke. It's not in the Gospel of Matthew. We take the star from the Gospel of Matthew. That's not in the Gospel of Luke. And we take the angels and the shepherds from the Gospel of Luke. They're not in the Gospel of Matthew. And then we take the Magi from the Gospel of Matthew, and they're not in the Gospel of Luke. And we weave this all together into a story we call the Christmas story. It's really we who have created the unity. The unity is not there. But so even though we religious liberals do this, it's taken to just tragic lengths to me by fundamentalists who have to wrestle with all of these contradictions and somehow explain them all away. There are books this thick written by fundamentalists trying to explain away all the contradictions. denying that they're there. And it just seems like a tremendous waste of human intelligence to do that. It's not just the details in the Bible that are contradictory, though. I wouldn't be talking about this if it was just these details. They're more substantial things, like you may be familiar in, this is from the book of Isaiah in the Jewish Bible. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Well, in the book of the prophet Joel, it says, beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. It's exactly the opposite. In both the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, Jesus says, whoever is not with us is against us. In other words, all the neutral people should be considered our opponents. Whoever's not with us is against us. But in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus says, whoever's not against us is for us. In other words, the neutral people should be considered our supporters. They're different concepts of God. At the very beginning of Genesis chapter 1, it says, when God created the heavens and the earth, the Hebrew word for God there is Elohim, which is a plural. In Hebrew, God is El, not Elohim. So what it really says is when the gods, plural, created the heavens and the earth. And this is just an artifact of the time before the Israelite people became monotheistic. They were not originally monotheistic. They became monotheistic. And the story goes back to when they weren't yet. So the story really is about when the gods, plural, made the heavens and the earth. In the 139th Psalm that I was just reading as a prayer, the God of that psalmist was omniscient, right? That God knew everything. God knew what the psalmist would do in his future and how long he was going to live and all kinds of things like that. That God was omniscient. But in Genesis, in chapter 3, the Adam and Eve story, Adam and Eve, after eating the forbidden fruit, they hide themselves from God because they're afraid, right? They know they've just done something God told them not to do. And God shows up and says, where are you? He doesn't know. He's going to ask. And they call out and identify themselves. Even more importantly than this kind of slightly more substantial contradiction, there are different concepts of ethics, of why we should try to do good, or to put it in a biblical context, why we should follow the Ten Commandments. In Leviticus chapter 26, God is talking now, God explains why we should follow the Ten Commandments. If you will not obey me and do not observe all these commandments, God says, I in turn will do this to you. I will bring terror on you, consumption and fever that waste the eyes and cause life to pine away. I'm going to make you sick, in other words. You shall sow your seed in vain, for your enemies shall eat it. Your crops will fail. I will set my face against you, and you shall be struck down by your enemies. Your foes shall rule over you, and you shall flee, though no one pursues you. Your land will not yield its produce, and the trees shall not yield their fruit. I will let loose wild animals against you, and they shall bereave you of your children. They'll kill your children and destroy your livestock. They shall make you few in number, and your roads will be deserted. This is why we should follow the Ten Commandments, according to Leviticus. In other words, if we don't, God will get us. God will get us. That's the reason. But in the book of Proverbs, one of the Ten Commandments is thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not have sex with another person's spouse. And we read this: a prostitute's fee is only a loaf of bread, but the wife of another stalks a man's very life. Jealousy arouses a husband's fury, and he shows no restraint when he takes revenge. In other words, you shouldn't sleep with another man's wife because the husband might make a lot of trouble, But see a prostitute instead. The fee is just a loaf of bread. So the reason for obeying the commandment against adultery is that it's practical, right? It's practical, that's all. Just common sense, it's practical. It's a completely different reason for following the commandments. Or in the book of the prophet Jeremiah in the Old Testament, God says to the prophet, I will write my law on their hearts. So God is saying, God has written his law on our hearts. The 10 Commandments are written on our hearts. That's sort of true, right? We have things we call a conscience, right? And so what we're being told there is we should follow the commandments because it's a matter of our integrity. It's a matter of our personal integrity. It's following something that's deep within us. I told a joke last time I spoke to you about Unitarian Universalists being like this. They're like a bunch of people sitting in the woods, sitting in a circle, drinking coffee, and arguing. In other words, UUs are diverse. We have different. We think religious questions are important, but we want to work out our own answers. So of course we come to different answers and different approaches. I think the Bible is like that. The Bible is a bunch of people arguing. The different books of the Bible are arguing with each other. When you have, and some of these biblical authors are geniuses, and some of them are jerks, I think. But the geniuses sometimes say jerky things, and the jerks sometimes have moments of genius. It's all very complicated. I think one of the reasons I like the Bible is it's really like a UU congregation. It's a tool for challenging the religious right, too. If you're interested in politics and you are upset at what the religious right says about our country, it says things like, this is really a Christian nation. Well, no, it isn't, really isn't, for example. Or if you have someone in your family who's way on the religious right, if you learn about the Bible, you learn what Bible scholars say about it, it helps you to talk to that person and say, hey, you're turning your brain down to half power. Don't do that. Don't do that. That's like putting shackles around your ankles. Why would you do that? Keep your brain turned all the way up. If God really gave us our brains, God is not going to punish us when we use them. For me, and maybe for some of you, I think learning about the Bible is a way of taking what has hurt you in the past apart. If something has hurt you in the past, you tend to turn your back on it, want to not have anything to do with it. And I think that's a lot of the reasons that UUs really don't want to have anything to do with the Bible or hear about the Bible, because they come from religious past where they've been hurt by people who kept using the Bible all the time. It's very understandable that we turn our backs on it. But I find, this is just my experience, if you take something that's hurt you and you disassemble it, you take it apart, so it lies before you at the end in pieces, it doesn't hurt you anymore. It stops hurting you. It's a way of putting that behind you. And the Bible widens the discussion. If we're people who think religious questions are important, the various biblical authors have points of view worth considering. They, like we, are struggling with basic questions, religious questions, questions about life and death, questions about getting along with each other, questions about what do I do when I have an important decision to make and there's not enough information? And usually when there's a really important decision to make, there isn't enough information. The biblical authors supply some ancient wisdom that can be of use, can be of guidance. And the Bible widens the discussion. When we talk about religious questions, it widens the discussion by including people who lived a long time ago. It makes the group bigger. They were smart. They were struggling with the same questions. I think Unitarian Universalists should take the Bible back. That doesn't mean we should have Bible readings every service. I don't think the average congregation could stand it more than about 3 times a year. But we shouldn't abandon it altogether. It's ours too. It's as much ours as it is the fundamentalists. And we cripple ourselves when we let fundamentalists take possession of the Bible and tell us what it means. It doesn't mean what they say it means in almost every circumstance. It doesn't mean what they say it means. It's ours too. It's ours too. And now for the support of this congregation and its work, the morning offering will be gratefully received and I hope freely given.
Even though the pandemic is winding down, we're still leaving the plate up here rather than asking you just to come up and make a contribution that you can.
We come to our time of sharing joys and concerns. The theory is that a joy shared is multiplied and a concern or sorrow shared is divided by the share. David.
So I have one of each. An attorney with whom I'm dealing, his daughter had premature twin girls, and one of them died. And as a daughter, slipped out, she's in the Queen's hospital. And so, prayers for him and them. That's the sorrow. The joy is about a miracle. Think of all of us. So I Like the Cottage Street version is called Red House, the Course of Miracles. Hospital in the bedroom. And there's a fellow there by the name of JP, that's his initials. And he was talking about the death of his son, he's 28, 29, and that's what led him all off the way and continued to drink. And I put my hand on the side of me, and there was a death certificate there beside me. And there was a death certificate of his son. You told me that happened.
Somebody else? Kid?
Back on the way. Back on the way.
So on my way to church today, I passed a couple of 9/11 ceremonies right over the side of the Sunset Police Fire Complex. They the food that was gathered was then there feeding at church today. And then it was a coffee shop where I saw probably half a dozen people in uniform having coffee outside. They probably did it the service on the morning of the summer. So today, perhaps sometime during the day, we take our own signs to remember all of those people, including my best friend's son-in-law, who lost his life.
Yeah, today's the 21st anniversary, yeah.
Some of you know Deb Ross, Debbie, and she has had a fairly serious diagnosis of some kind of autoimmune, and she's not doing real well psychologically, and not real well physically either, so.
I just have a little thought to what my kid said, and I said it to Walter this morning is, 9/11 obviously was so awful. But I'm fortunate to live in a place where we can still remember that one day of bombing and know the names of the people who were hurt. You know, like some people just day in and day out, that's their reality. You know, it's another one of our privileges, really, to be able to say that.
Go ahead.
Part of my joy today is being back here at the Unitarian Church with all my friends and people that are here. I did a lot of thinking over the summer and praying and thinking how things are different in my life and being grateful to Steve for giving me an opportunity to change my life and make things a little different from my perspective. But I have so much joy in coming to the Unitarian Church and feel like being blessed by so many people that at one time didn't know me, but are willing to open up their arms and invite me into this church and be a part of this community. And I enjoy it, and we have a nice look towards our future. Today being 9/11, of course, is a very sad day for everyone, because I remember very well what I was doing. But I am so happy to be here today. Thank you.
Al.
Yeah, real quick, I guess, when Dave was speaking, he talked about the recovery at Cottage Street, Cottage House. And, you know, over the years, I never really celebrated my sobriety days. It's supposed to be this great big huge giant thing in recovery programs. And a lot of people know like the exact day and time, you know, activity of what they were doing and acting for. But to combine the idea of miracles and this day is, so I chose a day that I know was way past the time that I had officially stopped using any kind of substances. And so I chose 999 so I would remember it, because I didn't really celebrate for the first 3 years because I had no confidence whatsoever that I was ever going to make it. I just didn't believe it. But I did it, you know, one day at a time, like they say. And even though I have had recovery in the past, but I had relapse, right? So I had it for 5.5 years. I really didn't believe that it was going to stay with me. And so 999 is the day I chose as my recovery date. And so I'm celebrating what I guess it's 13 years now. And when people sort of imply that there's no such thing as miracles, when I reflect on that phrase, I guess it depends on how you define miracle. Because I really firmly, absolutely, completely believe that my recovery and today not being tethered to alcohol or drugs or nicotine or any of those kinds of things. There's probably some other things out there I'm tethered to, but I'm tethered to this thing now. That's an absolute miracle. And so, the scientists in me usually agrees totally with whatever Richard says. But I do kind of, in the deepest recesses of my heart, believe that there is a power out there greater than myself that enabled me, that when I tried to attach to it, enabled me to recover. And I don't think, just to finish up here, I don't think society, our society, really believes that it's possible for people to recover from drugs and alcohol. That they need something else as a substitute for it. But I can attest that that's not true. Thank you.
Our congregant Deborah Torres, she's had quite a summer. She had to have a heart operation, not a really invasive one. It was she went home the next day, but it was a heart operation to correct the rhythm. And then back at home, she fell and broke her neck. She broke, one of the vertebrae in her neck, and has been at the intensive rehab at Charlton, just up the street. And last I heard, she was coming home Thursday. Now, I haven't checked yet. I don't know if she did come home Thursday, but she was going to come home Thursday. So I wanted you to know about that. One other thing that's on my mind, I was at a bookstore Thursday, a little afternoon, and I was walking up to the register, and the owner of the bookstore, who was a kind of classy woman in her 60s, she just looked up from her phone, and she had a funny expression on her face, and she said, "The Queen is dead. Long live the King." And it's going to take me a long time to adjust to this death myself. Are there any other joys or concerns? Then let's sing our closing hymn, which was written by our long ago minister Samuel Longfellow. O life that maketh all things new, number 12. May ours be a religion that, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space. Its shrine, the good heart. Its creed, all truth. Its ritual, works of love. Amen. Before the postlude, let me mention that we're serving coffee this morning up here in the sanctuary. But now,
Okay, for postlude, it's all this equipment here, this is gonna take a minute. Maybe Nancy could talk about what she played this morning. Well,
Yes.
I'm getting all this stuff
So
together.
I was looking for book songs, of course. I ultimately rejected Miriam in my but the first thing I played was a song called If They Asked Me, I Would Play. That's from the music of Hal Joey. And then the next thing was Jesus Loves Me, This I Know Because of the Bible. And then the offertory was another old hymn called I Love to Tell the Story. And what Jim's about to do went a little bit on what I had mentioned to him. He just got a little carried away. When I first saw the sermon title, the first song that popped into my brain was You Can't Judge a Book by Its Cover. And I mentioned that to Jim, and he kind of went off to do that.
I ran with it.
I'm only partially responsible.
Okay, so, this song is You Can't Judge a Book by Looking at the Cover. Written in 1962 by the Shakespeare of Chicago Blues, Willie Dixon. This is sung by Bo Diddley here. So I have three assistants here. We're going to come up here. Come on up, ladies. Yeah, you gotta get up here. Well, you can't judge an apple by looking at the tree. Can't judge honey by looking at the bee. Can't judge a daughter by looking at her mother. Can't judge a book by looking at the cover. Oh, can't you see? Well, you misjudge me. Oh, well, I look like a farmer boy. I'm a brother. Can't judge a book by looking at the cover. How we doing here? You can't judge a sugar by looking at the cane. Can't judge a woman by looking at her man. Can't judge a sister by looking at her brother. Can't judge a book by looking at the cover. Oh, can't you see? Well, you misjudge me. Well, I look like a farmer boy. I'm a lover. Can't judge a book by looking at the cover. Now you can't judge a fish by looking at the pond. Can't judge right by looking at the wrong. Can't judge daughter by looking at her mother. Can't judge a book by looking at the What in this well, I look like a bundle of blood. I'm a lover. And just looking at the cover. Okay. Thank you, ladies. Thank you very much. Okay, we're moving on to the talk again.